Dance with me. There's a red dot on your forehead, and it has been there for 90 seconds. Marisol Vega said it with her hand already locked around Emil Carras's arm, her mouth an inch from his ear, her voice steady in a way that cost her everything she had left. She had counted those 90 seconds herself. She had watched the dot settle, drift, and settle again, while 400 people ate salmon and clapped for a man who had killed 7 people with a signature. If you are new here, subscribe and stay with this story to the very end, because the woman in that ballroom was not saving him out of kindness. And drop the name of the city you are watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story travels tonight. Emil Carras did not look up. That was the first thing Mari noticed about him, and it told her more than the file she had spent 3 weeks building. A man with a rifle aimed at his skull looks up. He searches. He gives the shooter a clean, motionless target for the half second it takes to breathe out and press. Emil did none of that. His shoulders went hard under the wool of his jacket, his weight shifted forward onto the balls of his feet, and then his hand came around her waist and pulled her against his chest with enough force that her ribs complained. "Lead where," he said. "Not who, not why, just the direction." Mari made herself smile. It felt like something she was doing with a stranger's face. Left, then 2 steps back toward the ice table. "Do not stop moving." He moved. She had expected to have to drag him, and instead she found herself being steered, her heels skidding once on the polished floor before she caught the rhythm. The orchestra was in the middle of something soft and expensive, and around them couples turned in slow circles, and none of them knew. That was the strangest part. 400 people in that room, and only 3 of them understood what was happening. Her, him, and whoever was up on the mezzanine with a finger resting outside a trigger guard. She had found the dot by accident, which she would never admit to him. She had been standing near the champagne tower with a glass she had no intention of drinking, rehearsing the sentence she had come here to say when she saw a smear of red crawl across the curve of a crystal flute on a passing tray. It moved wrong. Reflected light from a chandelier does not move like that. It has a source that stays put. This one traveled, hunted, corrected. She had turned to follow the path of it and found it resting on the forehead of the most dangerous man in New Bedford, sitting still as a drop of blood between his eyebrows, while he listened to a woman in pearls tell him about her son's boat. 90 seconds. She had stood there for 90 seconds doing arithmetic instead of screaming, and she had hated herself for every one of them. And she had also known that screaming would have gotten him killed faster, because the math had told her something. The dot was arriving on his forehead at a downward angle, and she could see its reflection twice, once on the flute and once on the black lacquer of the piano lid, which meant she had 2 points of a line and could estimate the third. 11 meters up, left of center, behind the drape on the mezzanine where the caterers stored their empty crates. She had spent 9 years measuring things that could kill people if she measured them wrong. Beam deflection, well throat thickness, snow load on a flat roof in a February gale. Her whole adult life had been the same skill applied over and over, which was this: look at the thing everyone else is looking at and see the angle. "South mezzanine," she said against his jaw, close enough that anyone watching would have thought she was flirting. 11 meters up, 30 degrees off the axis of the room behind the velvet. He has a clean lane to the center of the floor and nothing to the north wall. Emil turned her hard, and the turn tore them 3 feet across the marble. "You're sure about 11? I'm sure about 11. "How?" "Because I did it twice and got the same number twice," she said, and her voice cracked in the middle of the sentence, and she was furious about it. She felt him register the crack. He did not comment. He simply changed the shape of the dance, and it stopped being a dance at all and became something else. A series of short, violent arcs that had nothing to do with the music and everything to do with keeping his head inside a moving pocket of air. Twice other couples had to break stride to avoid them. A man in a bow tie said something irritated. Emil did not hear him. His eyes were doing a slow scan of the room in segments, and Mari understood that he was not looking for the shooter. He was counting exits and measuring how many bodies stood between him and each one. She had come here to make a bargain with a criminal, and she was discovering that the criminal was a professional and that these were not the same thing at all. Her heart was going so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Some detached part of her brain kept narrating the way it always did on a bad site inspection when the numbers came back wrong and you had to keep your voice level while you told a foreman that his crew needed to walk out of a building right now. That voice was the only thing holding her together. It said you are going to survive the next 4 minutes, and then you are going to say the sentence you came to say. North Wall email said, kitchen corridor, 40 steps. He'll expect it. Then don't take 40 steps in a line. I wasn't planning to. He spun her again, and this time she saw the dot herself sliding across a marble pillar, lagging half a beat behind where his head had been. It was searching, it was frustrated. Whoever was holding the rifle was trying to lead a target that would not hold still, and he was leading badly. That was the second thing she noticed, and it would come back to matter more than anything else that happened that night, though she did not know it yet. The dot lagged. It overshot, and corrected like a hand that had never done this before. He's not tracking clean, she said. I noticed. Is that good? No, Emil said. Bad shooters hit the wrong people. They came around the near end of the floor, and Mari felt his hand slide from her waist to the flat of her sternum, and she had a full second to understand what was about to happen and no time at all to stop it. When I push you, go down and stay down, he said. Wait. Down and stay down. The cellos dropped into something low and he shoved her. It was not gentle and it was not meant to be. Her heel caught and she went backward into a cluster of people holding drinks, and the whole world became noise and spilled wine, and someone's elbow in her shoulder blade. She hit the floor on her hip, and her palm and glass went through the meat of her hand, and at the same instant, above the music, there came a flat synthetic crack that she would hear in her sleep for the next year. The chandelier came apart. She did not see the bullet hit it. She saw the light change, and then a ton of cut crystal was falling on 400 people in evening clothes. And the sound it made when it landed was not a crash. It was a long, rolling, shattering roar that went on, and under it were the screams. Mari rolled onto her stomach and covered her head with both arms, and something opened up a cut on her forearm, and she stayed exactly where she was for 3 full seconds, while people trampled past her. Then she started to crawl. She crawled through champagne and glass and someone's dropped shoe, and the thing she kept thinking absurdly was that she was ruining a dress that was not hers. She had borrowed it. She had borrowed it from a woman named Rosanna who cleaned offices in the Ashworth building and who had asked no questions when Mari showed up at her door at 9 at night, asking for something to wear to a place she had no business being. Her knee tore open on a shard and she kept going. Somewhere behind her, a man was shouting that there was a shooter, and the word did what the word always does, and the panic went from bad to total. Mari kept the kitchen doors in her sight and moved toward them on her hands and knees like an animal, and she was almost there when a hand closed on the back of her dress and hauled her upright so fast her vision went white at the edges. Run, Emil said. They ran. The kitchen was chaos staff pressed against the walls, a pot boiling over, unattended, a young man in an apron, standing frozen in the middle of the aisle with a tray in his hands, and no idea what to do with his life. Emil moved through it like water, and Mari stayed on his shoulder because there was nowhere else to be. He kept himself between her and the doors they had come through. She noticed that. She cataloged it the way she cataloged everything, and she did not know yet what to do with it. He kicked the service door, and the cold came in. There was a car. Of course there was a car. A black SUV idling 20 yards down the alley with a man standing in the open driver's door and a short rifle laid across the roof, and he had already picked his firing lane before they cleared the threshold. Boss, the man said. He was maybe 40, built like a bollard, and his voice was so flat that Mari understood he had done this before. A round came off the brick beside Emil's head and dusted him red. He did not flinch at that either. He put 3 shots up toward the roofline across the street, not aiming, just making noise and geometry, and he threw Mari into the back of the SUV with a hand between her shoulder blades and came in on top of her, and the door slammed, and something hit the window and turned it into a spiderweb that held. Sal drive. The tires screamed and caught, and the alley fell away. Inside the car, nobody spoke for 90 seconds. Mari lay half across the seat with her cheek against cold leather, and her whole body had started to shake, and she could not make it stop. It was not fear exactly. Fear had been useful. This was what came after when the adrenaline finished burning and left you with the bill. She got herself upright. Her hand was bleeding into her lap. Her knee was worse. She pressed the heel of her palm against the knee, and watched blood come up between her fingers and stain the borrowed dress, a color she could not name. Emil was watching the mirror's gun still in his hand, and he did not look at her for a long time. When he finally did, he reached into his jacket and dropped a folded white handkerchief onto her lap. Pressure, he said, hard, don't dab at it. She pressed. It hurt so much her eyes watered, and she was grateful for the pain because it gave her something to hold. Sal, Emil said to the front, anything. Clean so far. I'll take the bridge and double back. Take the long way. Then he turned in his seat and looked at Mari with an attention so complete that she felt it on her skin. You have about 4 minutes, he said, to explain why a structural engineer with a suspended firm and no invitation walked into a fundraiser tonight and put her hands on me. Her stomach dropped through the floor of the car. She had known he would find out who she was. She had not expected him to already know. And the difference between those two things was the difference between a negotiation and an execution. You looked me up. I look everyone up. You RSVP'd under a caterer's name. The caterer works for me. He said it without any satisfaction at all, which somehow made it worse. 4 minutes, Miss Vega. Mari made herself breathe. In through the nose. Out slow. The same thing she told young engineers to do before they went up on a scaffold for the first time. I need cold line 4 to stay standing for 11 more days, she said. Emil's expression did not change. Why? Because there is a demolition permit on it that was approved in 6 working days, when the average in this county is 14 weeks, and when they pull that building down, the connection plates go into a crusher and then into fill under the new terminal apron, and after that, nobody on this earth can prove why the roof came off it. The roof came off it because we had a 100-year storm. The roof came off it, Mari said, because somebody swapped the gusset plates for stock that was 2 millimeters thinner during the upgrade last spring and then had a welder run a cover pass over the joints, so an inspector walking the floor with a flashlight would see a nice fat bead and check a box. It failed at about 40% of design load. In a storm, sure, it would also have failed under a heavy snow or a full sprinkler charge or nothing at all in about 4 years. Sal's eyes came up in the mirror. Emil said, 7 men. 7 men, Mari agreed. They weren't on any payroll. No, which is why nobody has been arrested. That's part of why. And the other part, Mari looked out the ruined window at the city sliding past and felt the thing she had been carrying for 19 days shift and settle across her chest. The other part, she said, is that if you die tonight, Ashworth Security Company takes over Pier 9 within 48 hours because you are the only reason they don't have it already. And the first thing they do with Pier 9 is close the waterside access to that building. And then there is no way in for anybody. Not me, not a lawyer, not a federal inspector, because there is no federal inspector, because there is no case, because there are no bodies, because on paper, those 7 men died in a van rollover in Bristol County on a completely different night. She heard her own voice go thin at the end, and she pushed through it. So no, she said, I did not save your life because I have a good heart. I saved it because you are a load-bearing element, and I needed you to hold for 11 more days. For a moment, nobody in the car said anything at all. Then Emil Karras laughed. It was one syllable, and there was no humor anywhere in it, but it was a laugh. That, he said, is the first honest thing anyone has said to me in about 6 years. Don't get sentimental. I never do. He holstered the gun finally and leaned back, and she watched some of the rigidity go out of his shoulders and understood that it had been costing him. Now tell me the part you're lying about. Mari's hand tightened on the handkerchief. I haven't lied to you. You told me Ashworth sent the shooter. I didn't tell you that. You assumed it. I did, Emil said, and then I stopped assuming it, and I'd like you to tell me why, because you already know and you've known since the ballroom, and you've been sitting there deciding whether to say it. She hated him a little in that moment for being right. The laser, she said, the laser. Nobody who does this for a living uses a visible laser at 11 meters indoors under chandeliers. It's a beacon. It tells the target where you are. It washes out in bright light, and it does nothing for you that a scope doesn't do better. Anyone Ashworth hires has a budget and a resume. That was not a resume. She swallowed. And the dot lagged. He kept overshooting and pulling back. A trained shooter leads. That man was chasing. Sal said from the front, kid. Or somebody who's only ever shot at things that don't move, Mari said. Emil was quiet for a long moment. Then half to himself, Then who wanted me dead badly enough to try it in a room with 400 witnesses and no plan? Somebody who wasn't paid, Mari said. Somebody who wanted it for free. She did not know then how much that sentence would cost her later. She only knew that the temperature in the car changed after she said it, and that Emil turned back toward the window and did not speak again for 11 blocks. They did not go to a house. Mari had built a whole set of expectations out of movies, and none of them survived. There was no compound, no marble, no men with dogs. Sal took them down to the water and through a chain gate and into the loading bay of a defunct ice plant. One of the old ones that used to service the fishing fleet before everything went to shore sighed freezing, and the doors came down behind them and the noise of the world stopped. The cold in that building was a physical presence. It came up through the floor. Emil got out and came around and opened her door before she could, and she took his hand because her knee would not have held her otherwise, and she felt how rough his palm was, and thought absurdly that it was the hand of a man who had done actual work at some point in his life. He put her on an upturned crate under a work light. Then he went and got a green plastic case off a shelf and knelt down in front of her and took her ankle in his hand without asking. "I can do it," she said. "You can't see the back of your own knee." He was not gentle. He was efficient, which turned out to be a different and better thing. He put antiseptic in the wound, and she made a sound she was not proud of, and he did not stop or apologize. And then he pinched the edges together and ran a line of surgical glue and taped a pad over it and moved to her hand and picked 2 pieces of glass out of her palm with a pair of tweezers. "Why did you come to me?" he said while he worked. "There are federal buildings in Boston." "I went to a federal building in Boston." And Mari laughed. "It came out wrong. I sat in a waiting room for 4 hours," she said. "And then a very polite young attorney explained to me that I was describing a fraud committed with my own professional seal, that my seal appears on the certification of record for that building, that the certification is dated the 12th of last April, and that I would be well advised to retain counsel before making any further statements." Then she gave me a card and walked me to the elevator. Emil's hand stopped. "Your seal. My seal. On the building that fell. On the building that fell." He set the tweezers down. "Explain that to me," he said slowly, "because I want to be certain I understand what you just told me." And Mari Vega, who had held herself together through a rifle and a chandelier and a 2-block sprint on a torn knee, felt her hands start to shake again, and this time she let them. "Every licensed engineer in this state has a digital seal," she said. "It's a certificate. It's how we sign drawings now. Nobody stamps paper anymore. The certificate lives in a hardware key, and the key has a passphrase, and it is the single most guarded object in any engineer's life because that seal is not a signature. It's an oath. It means I looked at this, and I am telling you it will not fall down, and if it falls down, come for me. And somebody used yours." "Somebody used mine," she said, "on the 12th of April, at 3:17 in the morning." "Where were you on the 12th of April?" "St. Luke's," Mari said. "Bed 41. Bilateral pneumonia, day 3 of 5. I was on oxygen. I have a chart with a nurse's initials on it every 2 hours for that entire night." She heard Sal say something quiet in Greek from over by the truck. "So you can prove it," Emil said. "I can prove I was in a bed. I cannot prove where my key was because my key was in a safe at Prosper Engineering. And the only 2 people with the combination to that safe are me and Del Prosper, who taught me structures at UMass in 2016 and hired me in 2018 and signed my licensure recommendation with his own hand." Her voice did something she could not control. "So what I can prove is that either I got out of an oxygen mask at 3 in the morning to certify a building I never inspected, or the man who taught me everything I know handed my life to Colby Ashworth." Emil sat back on his heels. "And you can't say that out loud," he said slowly, "because the second you say it, you're a licensed engineer accusing her own mentor of a felony with no proof, and Ashworth's lawyers turn you into a disgruntled employee inside a week." "They already have," Mari said. "Check your phone. It went out at 6 this evening. Board of Registration opened an inquiry. There's a photo of me. They used my faculty headshot, the one where I'm smiling." She had said all of it now. All of it except the last part, and the last part was the reason she had walked into that ballroom, and she had not planned to say it tonight, and she said it anyway because something in the cold of that building took the lid off her. "I have their names," she said. Emil looked up. Whose? The 7, I have their names. Mari pulled the sleeve of the borrowed dress back from her wrist. There were 7 names written there in ballpoint along the inside of her forearm, in handwriting that had been rewritten so many times the ink had gone into the skin. They're not in any company record. They're not in any payroll file or any I-9 or any timesheet because Cold Line runs night crews through a labor broker who runs them through a second broker who does not exist on the 11th of any month. So there is no document anywhere in the state of Massachusetts that says those men were in that building. Then how do you have the names? Because the crew kept their own book, Mari said. Somebody always keeps a book. You cannot run a night shift without knowing who showed up. So the lead hand wrote it down every night hours and initials in a school notebook. And he wrote it in Cabo Verdeano because he's from Fogo, and so were 4 of the 7, and every single person in the chain of that company looked at that notebook and saw scribbles in a language nobody important reads and threw it in a bin. She looked up at him and found that she could not read his face at all. I found it in a bin, she said, 19 days ago, and I have been carrying 7 names around ever since. And there is not one legal thing I can do with them. And every night I lie there and I think about the fact that on the certification of record for the building that came down on top of them, the last name printed is mine. The ice plant was completely silent. Then Emil Carras stood up and looked at Sal and said something that changed the direction of Mari Vega's entire life. Get Del Prosper's home address. Boss? Not tonight, tomorrow. And I want to know every account Ashworth Cold Line moved money through in the last 14 months, and I want the demolition contractor's name, and I want to know who signed the permit and what he bought this year. You're not going to hurt Del, Mari said. It came out fast, and she was surprised by it. I'm going to talk to Del. Emil. He stopped at the sound of his own name, and she realized she had never said it out loud before. I need him alive, she said. I don't need him free. And I don't need him forgiven, but I need him alive and able to testify because a dead man cannot explain who he gave my key to. Emil considered her for a long moment. You've thought about this. I've thought about nothing else for 19 days. Then here's my side, he said. I'll give you 11 days. I'll give you Sal. I'll give you the water site of Pier 9, and I will keep you off the street because Ashworth now knows a woman put her hands on me in front of 400 people. And he will spend tomorrow finding out which woman. In exchange, you tell me everything you find when you find it, and you do not go into that building without me. Why do you care what happens in that building? I don't, Emil said. I care that Colby Ashworth has spent 2 years trying to take the docks off me by making my men look unsafe and my company look filthy. And tonight I found out he's been running a building that killed 7 people while doing it. He was quiet a beat. And because I've buried men who weren't on any payroll either, it's a common way to die around here. Mari sat with her wrapped knee and her 7 names and did the only calculation left. 11 days, she said. 11 days. And if it takes longer. It won't, Emil said. They're pulling the building on the 26th. She was already shaking her head. That's what the permit says. That's not what's true. She reached for the bag she had somehow not lost and pulled out a laptop with a cracked lid and opened it on her lap with hands that had finally stopped trembling. I've been watching the contractor's equipment scheduling since Tuesday. They booked a 200-ton crawler and a shear attachment out of Providence. Do you know what the pickup date is? Emil did not answer. The 19th, Mari said. They're pulling it 7 days early, which means I don't have 11 days. She turned the screen toward him. The certification of record was on at page 4, the block in the lower right, where the seal sat with its little verification hash and its date and its name. Marisol Vega, P.E., Massachusetts, number 51K. I have 6, she said, and that stamp says I killed them. 6 days changed the arithmetic of everything. Emil did not argue with her about it, which Mari noted, because in her experience, men argued with a woman's number before they checked it. He took the laptop, read the equipment, booking twice, handed it back, and said one word to Sal, and Sal went to make phone calls in a language Mari did not speak, and by 4 in the morning there were 3 men she had never met, standing in the loading bay of an ice plant, waiting to be told what a gusset plate was. She slept 2 hours on a cot that smelled like diesel and woke up with her jaw aching from clenching. The first thing she did was open a spreadsheet because a spreadsheet was the only place in the world where she still had authority. By 7, she had the shape of it. She needed four things to make a case that could survive a defense attorney: the physical plate, the paper trail that showed the substitution was a decision and not an error, a person who would say out loud that the cover wells were ordered in some way to put 7 men inside a building they had never legally entered. She wrote the four things down. She looked at them for a long time. Then she wrote a fifth line under them, which was the honest one. She wrote, "I can probably get two." Emil came down at 7:30 with coffee in a paper cup and put it beside her without a word, and then read her list upside down, which she found irritating and impressive in equal measure. Which two? The plate and the paper, those are objects. Objects don't get scared. And the man who ran the cover welds is a welder, Mari said, which means he's either dead deported or working 3 towns over under a different last name. And if I find him and put a subpoena in his hand, he loses everything and gets nothing. Why would he talk to me? People talk, Emil said. People talk to you because they're afraid of you. That's not the same as testimony. A man who says it because he's frightened will unsay it the second he's more frightened of someone else. She turned in the chair. I need him to want it, and I don't have anything to give him. Emil drank his coffee. Then start with the paper. The paper started with Del Prosper, and Mari had known that from the beginning, and she had been building elaborate reasons to go anywhere else first. She stalled for 4 hours. She pulled permit histories. She built a timeline of the Cold Line 4 upgrade from public filings and found nothing she did not already know. She sent an email to a former classmate at the state board and got a bounce back that told her the address had been disabled, which meant somebody had already gotten there ahead of her, which meant she had burned 4 hours confirming that she was alone. At noon, she stood up and said, "Take me to Dell." He lived in Fairhaven in the same shingled house he had lived in since 1994, and when he opened the door and saw her, his face did something Mari would think about for years afterward. It did not go guilty. It went relieved. That was the part that gutted her. He had been waiting for her to come, and the waiting had been worse than the arrival. "Mari," he said. "Don't." She came in past him. Emil stayed on the step with his hands loose at his sides, and Dell looked at him once and understood everything and let him stand there. "You shouldn't be here." "You handed him my key." Dell Prosper sat down heavily in a chair that had a permanent dent in the shape of him. He was 64. He had taught her how to read a moment diagram in a lecture hall with a broken projector, and he had come to her father's funeral, and he had cried at her licensure dinner, and told the whole room she was the best young engineer he had ever put his name on. "Yes," he said. Mari had prepared for denial. She had a folder for denial. She had nothing at all for that. "Say it properly." "I gave Colby Ashworth your certificate and your passphrase on the 9th of April, Dell said. "And he used it on the 12th, and I knew he would, and I have known every day since." Her ears rang. "Why?" "Because he owned my paper." He said it flatly, the way you say a diagnosis. "I refinanced the firm in 2021 through a lender that turned out to be his. I didn't know. Then I knew. He held $640,000 of my life, and he came to me and he said, 'I need a certification and I need it fast, and your girl's stamp is clean, and nobody audits clean.' And he said, 'If you don't, I call the note, and Prosper closes, and 40 people lose their jobs in a town where there is nothing else.' So you gave me." "I gave him a piece of paper," Dell said. "That's what I told myself. He builds cold storage. Cold storage doesn't fall down." "It fell down." "I know. 7 people, Dell." "I know." She stood in the middle of his living room with her hands shaking and waited for him to apologize, and he did not. And that turned out to be the twist of the knife. "I'm not going to tell you I'm sorry," Dell said. "Not because I'm not, because you'd take it and then you'd feel better, and I don't want you to feel better." He looked up at her with wet eyes and absolutely no self-pity. "I chose the bigger number. 40 families against a piece of paper. I did the math and I chose and I got it wrong, and there's no version of standing here where I get to unchoose it." "You didn't do math," Mari said. "You did math with the wrong variables. You put 40 jobs on one side and a signature on the other because you never once wrote down the people who'd be under that roof. They weren't in your equation. They weren't in anyone's." Dell's mouth moved and nothing came out. "Will you say it under oath?" "Yes." "You'll go to prison." "Yes," Dell said. "Mari, I've had a bag packed since the 15th. She got out of the house before she could soften, and she made it as far as the car before her legs went, and Emil caught her under the arm and put her in the seat and shut the door and stood outside it for a full minute, giving her the only privacy available, and she cried with both hands over her mouth so it would not make noise. When she was done, she rolled the window down. "He'll testify," she said. "One line for the paper." "Congratulations." "Don't. I'm not being cruel," Emil got in. "You just spent an hour buying a witness with your own skin. It cost you something. That's allowed to be true at the same time as it working." Mari looked out the window at the shingled house. "He's going to die in there," she said. "He's got a bad heart. He'll get 4 years and he'll die in 20 months and everyone will say the system worked." Emil did not tell her she was wrong. The retaliation came the next morning at 6:40, and it came in a way she had not modeled. She had been thinking about Ashworth as a man with lawyers. She had not been thinking about him as a man with a business that touched 1,400 jobs. And so she was unprepared when a fuel depot on the north side of the harbor came apart in a fireball that shook windows in Fairhaven, and the depot belonged to Emil. And 3 men who worked for him were inside it doing a 6 a.m. inventory count. 2 came out, 1 did not. Mari watched Emil take the call. She watched him say 4 sentences into the phone in a voice that never rose and then hang up and then stand completely still for about 10 seconds with his hands still around the phone. And it was the 10 seconds of stillness that told her a man had died. "Who?" she said. "Nikos Andreou. He was 51. He has a daughter at Bristol Community." "Emil, Don't." It came out harder than he intended, and she saw him register that. He put the phone down. "It's not yours. He's been coming for me for 2 years. You didn't start it. I accelerated it." "Yes," Emil said. "You did. And I let you, and I'd do it again, and I still have to go tell a 19-year-old that her father is not coming home. So don't take that from me by making it about your conscience." It was the harshest thing he had said to her, and it was also completely fair. And Mari sat down on a crate and did not speak again for an hour. That afternoon, she found the substitution. She found it because she stopped looking at Cold Line's records and started looking at the steel fabricators, which nobody had thought to protect, because nobody protects the third party. A shop in Taunton had cut the plates for the 24 upgrade, and their shop drawings were still sitting in a customer portal with a password that Sal's cousin's kid broke in 40 minutes. The original drawing called for half-inch plate. The as-built revision dated 11 days into the job called for 3/8. And in the revision note field, somebody had typed 6 words that Mari read 4 times before she believed them. "Per owner directive, VE, approved verbally." "Value engineering," she said out loud to nobody. "He value engineered it." Emil came over. "Translate. It's a real thing. It's a legitimate thing. When a job is over budget, you go through it and find places to save money without losing performance. You use a cheaper finish. You change a light fixture." She was talking too fast now. "You do not thin a primary connection plate by 2 millimeters on a long span roof and then not run it back through analysis, because the plate isn't decoration. The plate is the entire reason the roof is attached to the building." "How much did he save?" Mary ran the numbers on a napkin and then ran them again, because the first answer seemed too stupid to be real. $81,000, she said, "across the whole building. 81,000. The room was quiet. 11,500 a man, Sal said from the doorway. Nobody answered him. That night, Mari did the thing she had been avoiding for 19 days, which was to go find out who the 7 were as people, instead of as names on her forearm. She had told herself she was protecting the case. Keep them abstract. Stay clinical. Don't let it get into you, because grief makes you sloppy and sloppy loses. That had been a lie of convenience. The truth was that she was afraid of them. She was afraid that if they had faces, she would not be able to hold a caliper steady. She went anyway because Sal drove her, and because the notebook had a name at the top of every page in the same hand. And that name was Delfino Senna, lead hand, and Delfino Senna was one of the 7. His mother lived above a bakery on Acushnet Avenue. Mari stood outside for 6 minutes rehearsing sentences in her head, and every one of them was obscene, and then the door opened before she knocked, because the woman had seen her from the window, and there was no version of this that Mari controlled. "You are the engineer," the woman said. Mari's throat closed. "Yes." "Your name is on the paper." "Yes, ma'am." Isara Senna looked at her for a long moment. She was in her 60s. She had a dish towel in her hand, and she did not put it down. Come up, she said. Mari would remember that as the single most undeserved kindness of her adult life. The apartment had photographs in it. That was the part she was not ready for. Delfino at a christening. Delfino at 19 with a bad haircut. Delfino and his older brother on a boat, both squinting, both with the same jaw. They told me it was a van, Isora said, pouring coffee Mari had not asked for and could not refuse. A van on the highway in Bristol. They said he was riding to a job in Attleboro. My son had not worked in Attleboro one day in his life. He worked at the coal store. He came home smelling of the coal store. I washed the cold store out of his clothes for 6 years. I know. The company sent a card. She set the cup down. Not flowers, a card from a company with a printed signature. And a woman called from an insurance office and asked me if Delfino had ever signed anything. And when I said I did not know, she said, well then, and she hung up. Mrs. Sina, Mari's hands were flat on the table to keep them still. I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you decide what to do with me. My professional seal is on the document that says that building was safe. I did not sign it. It was stolen from me. I can prove I was in a hospital bed the night it was signed. I did not put my name on it, but it is my name, and it is going to stay my name in every record forever. And I am not here to ask you to forgive that. I'm here because I need the book. Isara Sina did not move. What book? Delfino kept a book, Mari said. Hours and initials every night in Cabo Verdeano. I found one. I found the one from November because somebody threw it out. But he would have kept them all, and the ones that matter are February. Because February is when the men were there, and February is the only thing in this world that can put 7 human beings inside that building on the night the roof came down. The woman's face did something complicated. Why does it matter that they were inside? She said. Everyone knows they were inside. And Mari had to say it. She had to say the ugliest sentence in the whole case out loud to a mother in her own kitchen. Because the law doesn't care what everyone knows, she said. There is no employment record, no time card, no badge swipe, no camera. Colby Ashworth can be charged with fraud because fraud leaves paper. He cannot be charged with killing them because as far as any document on this earth is concerned, your son was never in that building. He wasn't an employee. He wasn't a contractor. He wasn't there. Her voice broke and she let it. The only thing standing between Colby Ashworth and 7 counts of manslaughter is that nobody ever bothered to write your son's name down. Isara Sina stood up. She left the room. Mari heard a drawer. She came back with a shoebox and set it on the table and took the lid off. And inside were 14 school notebooks with rubber bands around them. And on top of the stack was a cheap black one with the corner burned. Tobias brought them, she said. Mari looked up. Who's Tobias? My older son. Mari's pulse changed and she did not know why yet. He went in, Isora said, before the police came. He went into that building at night and he took his brother's box out of the locker and he came here at 4 in the morning with it and he sat where you are sitting and he did not say one word for 2 hours. Mari's hands were on the notebooks. Where is Tobias now? I don't know, his mother said. He stopped answering me on the 6th of this month. He is a welder. He worked at the coal store too. Everything in Mari went very quiet. He worked at Coal Line. 6 years, both of them. Mrs. Sina, she could hear her own blood. Was Tobias on the night crew in the spring last spring, during the upgrade? He was on all the crews, Isora said. He was the one they called when something needed to be welded. Mari sat back in the chair. The man who ran the cover passes over the thin plates. The man who welded a lie shut with his own hands and then lost his brother under it 11 months later. He was not dead, he was not deported, he was not 3 towns over. He was somewhere in this city, and he had stopped answering his mother's phone 6 days ago, and the shooting at the gala had been 8 days ago. She got back to the ice plant at 11 at night with a shoebox on her lap and told Emil everything in one breath, and he listened without interrupting. And at the end, he said the same thing she had been refusing to say to herself. You're bad shooter. I don't know that. You know the shape of it. I know the shape of it, Mari admitted. He thinks you own the building. Half this city thinks I own the building. That's the whole point of Ashworth's last 2 years. Then he thinks you killed his brother. She pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes. And the day I put him on a witness stand is the day a defense attorney gets to say, ladies and gentlemen, the government's only witness tried to murder a man over this 11 months later, and the whole thing dies. Then don't put him on a stand. He's the only person alive who can say the cover welds were ordered. And he's the only person alive who can go to prison for running them, Emil said. You want him to walk into a federal building and confess to concealing the defect that killed his own brother. Think about what you're asking a man to do. Mari did think about it. She thought about it for a long time. I know exactly what I'm asking him to do, she said finally. I'm asking him to do what Dell did. And I'm going to have to look him in the face while I ask, and I don't have Emil Karras standing behind me to make it easier. Because if I bring you, he shoots at you again. The last blow of that week came on Thursday, and it came from her own profession, which she had not expected to hurt as much as it did. The Board of Registration suspended her license pending investigation that she had prepared for. What she had not prepared for was the press release from Ashworth Coal Line, which expressed profound sadness that the engineer of record for the February incident was now the subject of a state inquiry, and which pledged full cooperation, and which used the phrase, "Our thoughts remain with all those affected," and which was picked up by 3 outlets by noon. By 2 o'clock, a reporter had her cell number. By 4, someone had spray-painted a word on the door of her apartment building, and her landlord left a voicemail that started apologetic and ended with a date. At 6, her own professional association sent a form email removing her from a technical committee she had sat on for 4 years. She read all of it in a folding chair in an ice plant with a bandaged knee. I've been a licensed engineer for 6 years, she told Sal, who was cleaning a shotgun and had not asked. Do you know how hard it is? 4 years of school, 4 years under a licensed engineer, 2 exams 8 hours each. I passed the second one on my birthday. My father was already dead, so I called my mother at 10 at night to tell her, and she cried. Sal kept cleaning. It took me 12 years to get that seal, Mari said. It took Colby Ashworth 6 seconds to use it and 1 press release to take it away. Yeah, Sal said, that's how it works here. And then he said the thing that stayed with her. You know what the difference is between you and those 7 guys 4 days. That's it. You got 4 days of newspapers. He set the shotgun down. Nobody printed 1 word about them. Not one. They died under a roof and the whole city read about a van. That was the moment it stopped being a case. She stayed up until 3 with the 14 notebooks in a Cabo Verdeano dictionary, in a translation app that kept guessing wrong, and she went page by page through a dead man's handwriting until she got to February, and she found the 14th, and she found 7 sets of initials in a column with hours beside them. And at the bottom of the page, Delfino Sina had written a note to himself about the sprinkler charge being late again. 7 initials, not 7 names. She sat with that for a long moment, and then she went back through every notebook every month and started building a key matching initials to full names where he had written them out at the start of a job, and it took her until 5 in the morning. And when she was done, she had all 7. She wrote them out on a clean sheet of paper in block capitals, properly spelled with the accents where they belonged, because half the news reports about the van had gotten the spellings wrong, and she was not going to be one more person who did that. Then she went to the sink and washed the ballpoint off her arm for the first time in 22 days, because now they existed somewhere better than her skin. At 6:30, Emil came down, found her still awake with the paper in front of her. The Crane leaves Providence tomorrow morning, he said. Mari nodded slowly. She had known that. She had been working around it all night. Then we go in tonight, she said, and there's a storm coming in tonight. Gusting 60. I know. You want to cut steel out of a building that already fell down once in a 60-knot wind in the dark. Yes, Emil looked at her for a long moment. Say why, he said, out loud. Because if you say it wrong, I'm not taking you in there. Mari turned the paper around so he could read the 7 names. Because the Crane picks up at 8 tomorrow morning, she said. And the second that shear touches that roof, those plates go into a crusher and then into fill under the new terminal apron. And after that, no man on earth can say what killed them. Not me, not a federal engineer, nobody. And these 7 will go in the ground as a van accident in Bristol County forever. And the man who saved $81,000 will build the next one. Emil read the names. Salty, he called, without looking away from her, get the plasma rig in the generator. She did it to herself, and she spent the first 11 hours in federal custody proving it over and over inside her own skull. They put her in an interview room at the Moakley building and left her there for 2 hours before anyone came in, which was a technique, and she knew it was a technique, and it worked anyway. She sat with her hands flat on the table because otherwise they would start moving, and she ran the whole thing backward 22 days of it, looking for the moment she had stopped being an engineer and started being a person who wanted something. She found it easily. It was the equipment booking. The moment she saw a date and felt relief because a date meant a plan, and a plan meant she was no longer just a woman with 7 names on her arm. She had wanted the deadline. That was the ugly part. Ashworth had not tricked her. He had offered her something she was hungry for, and she had taken it with both hands. Agent Renata Coe came in at 4 in the afternoon with a folder and a bottle of water and set both down and did not open the folder. "Do you want a lawyer?" "I want to talk," Mari said. "So no and yes, and I understand you are going to write it down that I said that." "I am." "Then write it down." Cosat, she was maybe 45, and she had the specific tiredness of someone who had spent a career watching people destroy themselves in rooms like that one. "You cut 2 structural components out of a building under active investigation." "Yes." "In the company of 4 members of a criminal organization." "Yes." "One of whom died." Mari's throat closed. She got through it. "Yes." "You understand that everything you took out of there is worthless to me." "I understood it at 7:20 this morning," Mari said. "About 90 minutes before you came for me. I'd love to tell you I figured it out sooner." Coe studied her. "Then say the rest," she said, "because you've got the look of somebody who's been building an argument for 6 hours, and I'd rather hear it than pry it out of you." And Mari Vega, who had lost her license, her mentor, her reputation, and a man who had died pushing her across a floor, put her hands on the table and made the only pitch she had left. "You don't need the plates," she said. "You just spent a night nearly getting killed for them. I know I was wrong, not about what they prove, about needing them." She leaned forward. "There are 17 more of those connections still standing in that building. Ashworth thinks I took his evidence out of the crime scene. What I actually did was take 2 samples out of a set of 18 and leave the other 16 exactly where they are, undisturbed in a structure that hasn't been touched since February. I photographed every one of them from a distance before I cut anything. I never touched Grid 5. I never went into the collapse zone at all, and there's body camera footage that proves it." Coe's expression did not change, but something behind it did. "You want me to get a warrant. I want you to get a warrant and pull Grid 11 yourself with your own engineer on your own chain of custody and never mention my name in the affidavit. Everything you need is in a building you can walk into legally. I just told you where to look and what it weighs. And if my engineer measures it and gets 12.7 millimeters, then I'm a liar," Mari said, "and you should charge me with everything you've got and I'll plead." There was a long pause. "That's a hell of a thing to offer." "It's not an offer. It's how measurements work." She heard her own voice crack and hated it. "Agent Coe, I have spent 12 years learning to be the person in the room whose number is right. That's the whole job. That's the entire reason the license exists. You can hate me for what I did in that building 4 nights ago, and you would be correct, but do not sit there and think I'd bet my life on a number I hadn't checked twice." Coe opened the folder then. She turned it around. It was a photograph of the certification of record page 4, the seal block. Marisol Vega, P, Massachusetts, 51K, dated the 12th of April. "Tell me about this." "I was in St. Luke's." "So you've said, publicly, loudly." Coe tapped the page. "Here's my problem. A hospital chart proves where your body was. It doesn't prove where your certificate was. Defense says you were sick in a bed with your laptop and a phone and you signed a document you didn't want to read carefully because you were on fentanyl for chest pain, and now that 7 men are dead, you've invented a theft. That's not even a hard argument, Miss Vega. I could make it in 20 minutes. And that was the moment Mari stopped defending herself and started working. Because it was a good argument. It was the argument she would have made. And the second she looked at it as a problem instead of an accusation, the answer was sitting right there. And it had been sitting there for 22 days while she chased steel around a harbor. "Ask me the right question," she said. "Excuse me. You keep asking where I was. Ask where the signature was." Mari pulled the photograph closer. "This isn't a stamp agent Co. Nobody has stamped anything since about 2010. This is a cryptographic signature applied by a hardware token, and when it gets applied, the signing software writes a record, not just a timestamp. It writes the machine. It writes the local IP address of the device the token was plugged into, and it writes the certificate revocation check, which means at 3:17 that morning, that machine reached out to a validation authority over a network, who had gone very still. So there's a log. There are three logs, Mari said. There's the embedded signature metadata in the PDF itself, which nobody ever looks at because everyone treats these things like paper. There's the validation authority's server log, which is a third party, which is not Ashworth's and not mine and not yours. And if that machine was on a corporate network, there's a DHCP lease record and a firewall log with an outbound request at 3:17 in the morning on the 12th of April. And you're telling me you know where the machine was? I'm telling you I don't have subpoena power, Mari said. You do. Ko sat back. You've known this the whole time. I've known it was theoretically true the whole time. I've had a suspended license and no lawyer and no standing to demand a single record from anyone. Her hands were shaking now and she let them. Do you understand what that's been like? I've known where the answer was for 3 weeks. I could see it. And every door to it was locked. And the only man in this city who could open doors opens them the wrong way. And I let him and a man died. The room was quiet. Del Prosper is prepared to testify, Mary said. He gave Ashworth my certificate and my passphrase on the 9th of April in exchange for a loan not being called. He's already said it to me. He'll say it to you. But you can't build a case on one 64-year-old man with a heart condition and a motive to lie. So pull the logs, and then you don't need him to be believed. You just need him to be corroborated. Agent Ko closed the folder. You're being charged, she said. I want you to be clear about that. Nothing you've said in the last 20 minutes makes that go away. I know. I'm going to pull the logs. Thank you. Don't. Ko stood. I'm not doing you a favor. I've had a file open on Ashworth Cold Line since November, and everything in it is paper thin, and you just handed me the first thing anybody's given me that I can actually get a judge to sign. At the door, she stopped. 7 men, she said. You know their names. Mari recited them, all 7 properly with the accents where they belonged. Ko wrote them down. Arraignment was on the 2nd day and bail was set at a number Mari could not have reached in 5 years of working, and it was posted within 90 minutes, and she did not have to ask by whom. What she did not know until later was what it cost. Emile Carras walked into a federal building on a Tuesday morning with a lawyer and gave the government 3 of his own operations. Not everything. He was not a fool, and he was not a martyr. But he gave up a cash channel he had run for 11 years and 2 names inside the Port Authority, and he signed a proffer agreement that put a criminal exposure of 6 to 8 years on the table in exchange for cooperation and for one specific term that his lawyer told him 3 separate times was insane. The term was that Marisol Vega be granted supervised access to a university structural testing laboratory. You understand, his lawyer said, that you are trading years of your life for a woman to be allowed to break things in a basement. Yes. Emile. Draft it. Mari found out on the 4th day, and she came apart in a way she had not come apart for Sal or for Del or for her own license. Why, she said. They were in a conference room at his attorney's office because it was the only place they were legally permitted to be together. And Emile sat across from her with his hands folded and looked exactly the same as he had looked in that ballroom, which was the thing that undid her. Because there's no case without the test. There's no case without you either. You just gave them 6 years. I gave them things they were going to have in 18 months anyway. I've been watching them build it. He shrugged one shoulder. This way it buys something. Don't do that. Don't make it arithmetic. It is arithmetic. It's not. Mari's voice went up, and she did not care. Sal did arithmetic when he put me on that floor. Della did arithmetic when he chose 40 jobs over my name. Colby Ashworth did arithmetic and got $11,500 a man. Everybody in this story keeps doing arithmetic, and I keep burying people, so don't sit there and tell me you ran a calculation because I don't want to hear it from you. Emile was quiet for a moment. All right, he said. Then here's the other reason, and I'll only say it once. Say it. I've been in this business since I was 22. In that time, I have watched about 9 people try to do something like what you're doing, and every one of them was doing it for themselves, for a payout or a plea or because someone did something to their family. He looked at her. You never met those 7 men. Not one of them. You couldn't pick them out of a photograph. And you have spent 26 days destroying your entire life for people who cannot thank you and would not have known your name. That's not noble. My seal is on the— I know what your seal is on, Emil said, and I know 100 men who'd have run. You didn't run, so I signed the paper. He unfolded his hands. That's the whole of it. Don't ask me again. The lab was at UMass Dartmouth in a high bay with a hydraulic actuator that could deliver 220 kips, and it belonged to a professor named Aidan Whelan, who had taught Mari's junior year steel design course, and who agreed to run the test on one condition. I want Ashworth's engineers in the room, he said. Absolutely, Mari said. Whelan blinked. I expected you to fight me. I want them in the room. I want them standing at the console. I want their instrumentation next to yours, and I want their signature on the specimen fabrication, and I want them to pick which of the two assemblies gets loaded first. She was talking fast. Because if I win this quietly with my own people, it's an accusation. If I win it with their engineer holding the clipboard, it's a fact. They built 2 specimens, one to the certified drawing half-inch plate, full penetration weld, exactly what the document with her name on it said existed in that building. One to the as-built condition she had measured 3/8 plate, 9.16 millimeters with a cover pass laid over a joint that had already been made. Fabrication took 9 days. Ashworth Cold Line sent 2 engineers and a lawyer, and the lawyer objected to everything. And Whelan let him put every objection on the record because a record you cannot object to later is worth more than an argument won early. Mari was not permitted to touch the specimens. She stood behind a yellow line with her hands in her pockets for 9 days. On the 10th day, they loaded the control specimen, the one built to the drawing. It held to 104% of design load, and then it yielded slowly the way steel is supposed to yield, bending and complaining and giving warning, which is the entire philosophy of the profession. Steel is chosen because it tells you. Concrete surprises you. Steel screams first. Ashworth's senior engineer wrote a number on a clipboard and said nothing. On the 11th day, they loaded the AS-built specimen. The high bay was full. Co was there with 2 prosecutors. Whelan's graduate students were on the instrumentation. Ashworth's engineers stood at the console with their arms folded. Mari watched the load display and did the only thing she could do, which was count. 10%, 20. The plate was fine at 20. It would be fine at 20, 30, 35. At 41% of design load, it failed, and it did not yield. It tore. The cover pass came off the parent metal in a single sheet because it had never fused to anything, because you cannot weld over a finished joint and make a new joint, and the plate underneath went through in a fraction of a second with a bang that made 2 people in the room shout. 41%, not 60, not 80, 41. Mari heard herself say out loud in a completely flat voice, the snow load alone was 58. Nobody spoke. Aidan Whelan took his glasses off and pinched the bridge of his nose and said, that building was going to fall down. It was always going to fall down. February was the weather being polite about it. And then he said the thing that ended the room. There was no accident. There was a schedule. Ashworth's senior engineer set the clipboard on the console. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he walked out of the high bay and did not come back, and his lawyer went after him. And 4 days later, that engineer called Renato himself. The logs came back 11 days later. The Validation Authority's server, a third party in Virginia with no interest in anybody, recorded a certificate status check at 31704 on the 12th of April, initiated from a static IP address registered to Ashworth Cold Line's corporate offices on Front Street. The corresponding firewall log recorded the outbound request. The DHCP lease put the machine on the 4th floor. Del Prosper's testimony matched the 9th. The IP matched the 12th. St. Luke's matched the nurse's initials every 2 hours all night. Colby Ashworth was indicted on a Thursday. Mari watched the press conference on a laptop in a lawyer's office and waited to feel something and did not. Because she had read the indictment first and she had counted the counts. Wire fraud, federal program fraud because the terminal project had taken federal money, falsification of records, conspiracy, obstruction, 22 counts of guidelines exposure north of 15 years, and not one count of manslaughter. Not one. They were in that building, she said to Coe in a corridor with people walking past them. Agent Coe. They were at work. Delfino Senna clocked 6 years there. His mother washed the cold out of his clothes. I know. Then charge it. With what? Coe's jaw was tight and Mari understood that she had asked the same question upstairs and lost. Marisol, listen to me, because I'm going to say this once, and then I'm going to go be professional about it. To charge a death, I have to prove a death occurred in a place caused by a condition for which he's responsible. I have the condition, I have the responsibility. I have a building. What I do not have is one single admissible document, one photograph, one badge swipe, one camera frame, one payroll entry, one tax record, or one living human being that puts a body inside that structure on the night of the 14th. There's a notebook. There's a notebook in a language the court will need certified translation for, written by a man who is dead with initials instead of names, that a defense attorney will call hearsay in 4 seconds flat and win. It's not a business record. It wasn't kept by the company. It was kept by a foreman in a drugstore composition book. Coe's voice dropped. And do you know what Ashworth's attorney is going to say? He's going to say those men were never on that site, that Cold Line used a licensed labor supplier. That if unauthorized individuals entered the premises after hours, that's trespass, and that Cold Line can't be held responsible for the deaths of people it had no knowledge were there. Mari felt the floor tilt. They're going to say they were trespassing. They're going to say it very sadly, with their hands folded. They were working. I believe you, Coe said. Believing you is free. Mari got outside somehow. How? She sat on a bench across from the federal courthouse for a long time. 1,400 jobs, $81,000, $11,500 a man. And at the end of every equation, the same answer: the men who die cheapest are the men who leave no paper. That was the whole system. Not a conspiracy, a design. You hire through a broker, the broker hires through a broker, and by the time a man is standing on a freezer floor at 2 in the morning, there is no line connecting him to the company whose name is on the roof. It saves money on wages. It saves money on insurance. And on the night the roof comes off, it saves the company from a homicide charge. And nobody ever wrote that last part down because nobody had to. The arraignment for Ashworth was set for the following week, and Mari went, and she should not have. He saw her in the gallery. He was 66 years old and wearing a suit that cost more than her car. And he looked at her with something she had not expected, which was not hatred, it was recognition. In the corridor afterward, with his attorney trying to steer him toward the elevators, he stopped. Miss Vega, don't talk to me. You've never run a business. He said it almost kindly. This port was dead in 2009, dead. 1,400 jobs. My father's yard closed in '04, and I bought it back out of receivership with money I did not have. And I have kept this waterfront breathing for 17 years, and I have done it by signing things that were 95% true, because that is the only way anything gets built in this country. Every structure you have ever walked into stands on a signature somebody rounded off. 7 men. And if I stop, his voice sharpened, if I run every job clean and slow and honest, I lose the terminal bid, and the terminal goes to a Norfolk outfit, and 1,400 people in this city lose their houses. So tell me, engineer, you're so good with numbers. Who were you saving? And Mari Vega found that she was not angry. She reached into her coat and took out a folded sheet of paper and opened it and held it up so he could see it, and it was the list block capitals, all 7 properly spelled. You didn't weigh anything, she said. Ashworth looked at the paper. You want me to believe you sat down and put 1,400 jobs on one side and 7 lives on the other and made a hard choice. You didn't. You never wrote them down. Her voice did not rise at all. You made one decision, Mr. Ashworth, and it was where to take the 81,000 from. And you took it out of the connection plates because the men standing under those plates were bought through 2 brokers and a phone number. And men bought that way don't generate paper, and no paper means no lawsuit and no inquest and no homicide charge. That's not a hard choice. That's the easiest choice in the world. He said nothing. You didn't gamble with 7 lives, Mari said. You gambled with 7 lives you'd already made sure could disappear. That's why you can stand here and argue with me. You're not defending a decision. You're defending an accounting method. Colby Ashworth's mouth opened and closed. Then his lawyer took his elbow, and he let himself be led away, and Mari stood in the corridor holding a piece of paper. That night, she went back to the apartment above the bakery on Acushnet Avenue because there was one thing left and she had run out of ways to avoid it. Isaracina made coffee, neither of them drank. He is charged, Mari said, for the papers, for the money, not for Delfino. Why? And Mari made herself say it plainly because this woman had been lied to gently by professionals for 5 months and deserved at least one person who would not do that. Because there is no document that says your son was at work that night, she said. And the law will not accept a mother's word or a foreman's notebook or the fact that everyone in this city knows. It needs a living person who was inside that building, who worked on that crew, who can stand in a courtroom and say under oath, I was there, they were there. This is what we did, and this is who told us to do it. Asaracena set down her cup. Then you need Tobias. Yes. He will not answer me. I know. Mari's hands were flat on the table. Mrs. Sina, there's something else, and I need to say it before you help me, because if I don't say it now, I'll be one more person who used you. Say it. Your son, Tobias, welded those joints, Mari said. The cover passes. He was told to run a bead over the top of a connection to make it look thicker than it was, and he did it, and 11 months later, that connection came down on his brother. He knows that. He has known it since February. Her throat was closing. If I find him, and if I ask him to do what I need him to do, he will have to say all of that out loud in a federal courtroom with his mother in the room. And he may go to prison for it. Isaracena did not cry. She looked at the window for a long time. You are asking me to help you take my second son. Yes, Mari said. That's exactly what I'm asking. And in the silence that followed, both of them heard it at the same moment, a key in the downstairs door, and then footsteps on the stairs, slow, heavy, a man who had climbed them 10,000 times. Isaracena's face went white. The footsteps stopped outside the door. The door did not open for 11 seconds. Mari counted them because counting was what she did with fear, and because she understood in the first two that the man on the other side had heard her voice through the door and was deciding. Then it opened. Tobias Sena was 31 and looked 10 years older, and he had his brother's jaw and his mother's eyes, and he stood in the doorway with a canvas bag over one shoulder and looked at Mari Vega for a long moment without any surprise at all. You're the engineer, he said. Yes, I know what you look like. Your picture's been on the news for 3 weeks. He set the bag down. The one where you're smiling. His mother stood up and said his name, and he put a hand out, not unkindly, and she stopped. Mai, sit down. 6 days, Isora said. 6 days you don't answer me. Then you walk in like 22 days, Tobias said. It's been 22. Nobody had told Mari that. Nobody had needed to. 22 days took it back past the gala, past the chandelier, past every single thing she had done. All the way to the night, a man with no training and a borrowed rifle had put a red dot on a forehead and started this. She sat very still. I came for the box, he said to his mother. I'm going away, and I wanted the box, and I wanted to see you first. You are not going anywhere. May. Sit down, Asoracena said, and Mari watched a man who had almost committed a murder obey his mother like a boy. He sat. He put both hands on the table. They were welder's hands, scarred across the knuckles, and Mari looked at them and thought about a bead of metal laid over a joint that was already finished. How much does she know? Tobias asked. I know you welded the cover passes, Mari said. His head came up. I know somebody ordered it and you did it. I know you went into that building the night after the collapse and took your brother's box out of a locker before the police came. And I know you have not slept properly since the 14th of February because nobody who did what you did sleeps. You don't know anything about me. That's fair, Mari said. Then tell me the part I've got wrong. Tobias Sena looked at his mother and then at the table, and then he said the thing that came out of him like something being pulled. They told me it was cosmetic. Go on. Rossi, the site super, he comes to me in April last year, and he says the inspector's coming Thursday, and the joints look thin, and can I fatten them up? His voice was flat and fast. That's the word he used. Fatten. And I said, fatten how? And he said, run a pass over the top, make it look right. And I said, that does nothing structurally. And he said, I know it does nothing. That's why it's fine. Nothing's changed. It just looks better. And you believed him. No, he said it hard. No, I knew. I've been welding structural for 9 years. I know exactly what a cover pass on a finished joint is worth, and it's worth nothing. And I did it anyway. And I did it for 11 joints over 2 nights at $42 an hour. And I did not ask one single question about why they looked thin in the first place. Isora Senna made a small sound. Why, Mari said. Because if I ask why I'm off the job, he looked up. You want the honest answer? That's it. Not because they threatened me. Nobody threatened me because I was working and my brother was working and my mother lives above a bakery and the guy who asks questions doesn't get called back. That's the whole thing. Nobody had to lean on me. The job leaned on me. And in February, Tobias did not answer for a while. I got there at 6 in the morning, he said. They already had the tape up. I stood on the street and I looked at where the roof was and I knew. Before anybody told me anything, I knew because I knew where those joints were and I knew what I'd put on top of them. 11 months. 11 months and it came down on Delfino. Tobias, his mother said. So I went in that night and got his box and I came here and I sat where she's sitting and I couldn't say it to you. He was not crying. He looked like someone who had finished crying a long time ago. And then they told you it was a van in Bristol, and nobody printed his name and nobody came, and there was no inquest, and I understood that nothing was going to happen. Ever. To anyone. So you went after Karis, Mari said. The room stopped. Isora Senna turned to her son. What is she saying? What is she saying, Tobias? He put his hands flat on the table. The gala, Mari said. 400 people, 11 meters up on the south mezzanine behind the caterer's drape. A laser sight because you'd never done it and you thought you needed one. And you chased the target instead of leading it because the only things you'd ever shot at were paper and deer. You saw me. I saw the dot. I had him, Tobias said. I had him for a minute and a half and he was standing still and then some woman put her arms around him and started dancing. Yes, he stared at her. That was you. That was me. And then Tobias Sina laughed one terrible sound and put his face in his hands. I thought it was his building, he said through his fingers. Everybody says Karis owns the waterfront. Karis owns the cold store. Karis owns the docks. Karis this, Karis that. 2 years of it, every bar in this city. So I sold my truck and I bought a rifle off a guy in Fall River and I went to a party in a suit I borrowed from a cousin. It was never his building, Mari said. Ashworth put that story into this city on purpose. It was the whole strategy, make Karis look like the man who runs the waterfront so that anything ugly on the waterfront sticks to him. It worked so well that a welder from Fogo nearly shot the wrong man in front of 400 witnesses. And you stopped me. I stopped you. Tobias took his hands away from his face. Why are you here, he said. And Mari Vega, who had thought about this moment for 11 days, laid it out with no softening at all. Colby Ashworth is indicted on 22 counts of fraud, she said. He is going to prison for the money. He is not charged with a single death because the government cannot prove that any human being was inside that building on the 14th of February. No payroll, no badge, no camera, no contract. Your brother worked there 6 years and there is no document in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that says he ever set foot on the property. That's not possible. That's not an accident, Mari said. That's the design. 2 labor brokers deep and the men on the floor stop existing on paper. It saves wages, it saves insurance, and on the night the roof comes off, it saves them from a homicide charge. Nobody wrote that last part down. Nobody had to. Tobias's face changed slowly. So he walks, for Delfino, for all 7. Then what do you want from me? I want you to testify, Mari said. I want you to sit in a federal courtroom and say your own name and say that you welded 11 cover passes in April on the orders of a site superintendent and that you worked on that crew for 6 years and that you know the names and the faces of the men who worked those night shifts and that you can identify your brother's handwriting in a foreman's book. I want you to put those 7 men inside that building and go to prison. Probably not, but possibly. I'm not going to lie to you about it. Say the rest, Tobias said. Mari made herself hold his eyes. The rest is that the moment you take that stand, Ashworth's attorney owns you, she said. He will make you say the wells out loud in front of your mother. He will ask you whether you understood what you were doing, and you'll have to answer yes. And then he will find out that you tried to kill a man over this 11 months later. Because he will find out, they always find out, and he will stand up and tell 12 people that the government's only witness is an attempted murderer who is testifying to save himself. Then I'm useless to you. You're the only thing I have, Mari said, and I would rather walk you in through the front door with everything on the table than have them find it under a rock. There was a long silence. Isara Sena spoke first, and her voice was steady in a way that made Mari's chest hurt. Tobias, look at me. My don't. I buried one son and alive, she said. They put in the paper that he died on a highway. Every person at that funeral had been told a lie, and half of them believed it, and I stood there, and I could not correct them because I had nothing but my mouth. She reached across and took his hands, both of them, the scarred ones. You have more than your mouth. You have your name. They'll take everything. They already took everything, his mother said. They took him. You are only deciding what it was for. Tobias Sena put his head down on the table and wept, and his mother held the back of his neck, and Mari Vega got up and stood facing the wall and gave them the only privacy that room contained. He surrendered himself on a Monday with a lawyer Emil paid for and never mentioned. What followed was not dramatic, and Mari would say afterward that it was the hardest work of her life. 6 weeks of it. 6 weeks in a conference room with Tobias Sena Agent Co., a certified Cabo Verdeano translator, and 14 composition notebooks. Because a notebook by itself was hearsay. That was the wall. A dead man's private diary proves nothing. So Mari did what she had done every day of her career, which was to take an unacceptable thing and turn it into an acceptable one by finding independent verification for every single line. The freezer plant had run automated temperature logs, and those logs recorded every door cycle on the loading side, and those records had been preserved because the insurance company had subpoenaed them for a completely different reason in March. Delfino Sena's notebook said the crew came on at 10 and broke at 2. The door log showed a cycle at 22:04 and another at 02:11 every night for 6 years. The sprinkler system had an inspection tag with initials on it that matched a set in the book. The building's own maintenance log recorded a compressor fault on the 3rd of January, and the notebook recorded the same fault on the same date in Cabo Verdeano. With the hours it took 2 men to clear it. Line by line, night by night, Mari built a bridge between a dead foreman's handwriting and the machine records of a company that had never intended to keep track of him at all. You're turning a diary into a business record, Co said on the 19th day. I'm turning a diary into a corroborated record, Mari said. It doesn't have to come in on its own. It has to come in beside a door cycle log that nobody can argue with. Tobias worked beside her for all of it. He identified 29 men from initials. He drew the floor plan of the night shift from memory and got it right to within 4 feet. He recognized a set of initials nobody could place and said, that's a mill car. He only worked 11 nights. He went to New Jersey, and Amilcar was located in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and gave a statement. On the 14th of February, 1 year to the night they finished it. 7 men, 7 names, 7 sets of hours, 7 independent corroborations, placing each of them inside that structure between 10 in the evening and the moment the roof came off. Co took it upstairs. The superseding indictment came down 9 days later with 7 counts of involuntary manslaughter attached. And for the first time in 13 months, a court document in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts contained the sentence, the victims were engaged in employment at the site. Mari read that sentence 11 times. She was not in the courtroom for the verdict because she was a witness, and witnesses wait outside. She sat on a bench in a corridor for 4 hours and 19 minutes. Colby Ashworth was convicted on 19 of the 22 fraud counts and on all 7 manslaughter counts, and he was sentenced 11 weeks later to 19 years. Now the cost, because there was one and it was not paid by him. The Board of Registration for Professional Engineers convened on Mari's matter in the spring. She hired no attorney. She sat at a table by herself in front of 5 people, 3 of whom she had known professionally for years, and she did not contest a single fact. Ms. Vega, you entered a structure under active investigation without authorization. Yes. You removed structural elements from that structure. Yes. You did so in the company of individuals under federal indictment. Yes. Do you wish to offer anything in mitigation? And Mari, who had thought about this for 100 days, said no. I want to say one thing, and it isn't mitigation. Her hands were flat on the table. Everything you have in front of you is true, and I did all of it. I'd like the record to show that I understood at the time that it was wrong, and that I didn't do it because I was confused. I did it because I was in a hurry, and I was angry, and I thought the rules were in my way. She took a breath. The rules were not in my way. The rules are the only reason my number meant anything when I finally got to say it out loud. If you let me keep this license after what I did with it, it stops meaning what it's supposed to mean, so don't. They revoked it permanently, not suspended, revoked. She walked out of that building at 11 in the morning and stood on the sidewalk and understood that she was, for the first time since she was 22, not an engineer. Del Prosper pleaded guilty and got 4 years, and he died in his 20th month of a cardiac event in a federal medical facility in Devons. Mari went to the funeral. 11 people came. She stood at the back and did not speak to anyone, and she did not forgive him. And she also cried, and she had long since stopped believing those two things were in conflict. Tobias Sina pleaded to a single misdemeanor count of falsifying a record. He received 2 years of probation and 400 hours of community service, and the attempted homicide was never charged because the only person who could have identified the shooter in that ballroom was Marisol Vega, and she was never asked directly, and she never volunteered it, and she carried that for the rest of her life as the one clean lie she had told. I went back to welding. He was not permitted to work structural for the term of his probation, so he welded railings and gates and trailer hitches, and he was good at it, and he did not miss a single check-in. Sal Mavros stayed dead. His widow received a sum of money from a man who was in federal prison, delivered by an attorney with no name on it. His younger boy started at Bristol Community in the fall. The boat in the yard never got finished, and Mari drove past it once and had to pull over. The Port redevelopment went ahead. That was the part that nobody in any of the news coverage ever quite reckoned with. Ashworth Coal Line was dissolved, its assets were sold to a Norfolk holding company, and the $800 million terminal project proceeded almost exactly on schedule with a different name on the sign. 1,400 jobs did not disappear. They changed employers, which meant Colby Ashworth had been wrong about the only thing he had ever been certain of, and he had killed 7 men to protect a number that was not even real. And Emil Karras went in on a Tuesday in October and got 6 years. Mari drove out to see him on the first Saturday she was allowed to in a car she had bought with money from a consulting job. She could not legally sign for working as a technical analyst for a firm that hired her precisely because everyone in that industry now knew exactly who she was and exactly what she would refuse to do. He looked the same. That was the thing that got her. 200 days inside, and he sat down across the table and looked exactly like a man standing by a champagne tower. "You've been busy," he said. "Whelan's using the test in a paper. There's a bill in the State House about labor broker records on state-funded projects. It's going to die in committee." She shrugged. "It'll come back. Your license gone permanently. You didn't fight it." "No," Emil nodded slowly. "Good," he said, and she loved him a little for that, for not once telling her she should have. They talked about nothing for a while, the way people do when the important thing is sitting on the table between them. Then he said it. "The annulment. Your lawyers had the paperwork for 6 months, I checked." "I know. You haven't filed?" "No." "Why?" And Mari Vega, who had walked into a ballroom 14 months earlier and called herself a stranger's wife because she needed 90 seconds of his attention, gave him the truest answer she had. "Spousal privilege," she said. Emil's face did something. "Say that again." "In this state and in federal court, a spouse cannot be compelled to testify against a spouse about confidential marital communications. And there is nobody alive who knows more about the inside of your operation in that 11-day window than I do, because I was standing in the middle of it." She held his eyes. "Your proffer isn't finished. They're going to keep coming. And every time they come, the one door they cannot open is me. That's tactics. That's tactics. So it's a legal instrument." "It's a legal instrument," Mari said. Emil sat back. "Is that all it is?" And there it was. She thought about the answer for a long moment, and what she said was not what she had planned to say, and it was better. "I don't know how to separate those two things anymore," she said. "I've tried. I stood in a ballroom and did geometry off a reflection to save a man I'd never met, and I told myself it was because you were load-bearing. Then a man died pushing me across the floor, and you signed away 6 years so I could break a piece of steel in a basement, and I have gone over it, looking for the line where the calculation stops and something else starts, And Emil, there isn't one. There's no line. I did the math and the math came out as you. Nobody spoke for a while. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me, Emil said. It's the most honest thing I've ever said to anybody. He put his hand flat on the table, palm down, and she put hers next to it, not touching, because touching was not permitted. And they sat like that for the rest of the visit. They rebuilt Pier 9 2 years later. The new terminal went up with connection details drawn to a standard that Marisol Vega had proposed to that port authority in 23, and that had been rejected as excessively conservative and not cost competitive. She was not consulted. Her name is not on one drawing, one specification, one submittal, or one page of the design basis report, and it never will be because she is not a licensed engineer and can never be one again. The steel is half an inch. On the east face of the containment wall, low down where the walkway comes around from the fish market and where nobody official has ever thought to look, there is a small bronze plate. It has 7 names on it. They are spelled correctly with the accents where they belong in the language the men spoke. No one on the Port Commission authorized it. No one on the Port Commission knows who mounted it, but it was set with a bead of weld so clean you would have to be a professional to see the work in it, and it has never once been taken down.